Okay, welcome to the second part of the telephone systems, conventional. I think, well, for the class of 2025, I think what I'm going to do is, I was going to do the conventional systems this week, as well as the VoIP telephone systems, but it seems like we're getting into some details that I just need to convey to you. So we're going to have the whole week for the conventional systems, and then we're going to pick it up next week on the VoIP telephone systems. We do have that cushioning available to us, so you're going to get everything properly anyways. All right, so let's see, where can we start here? Let's start on the top part here. CO stands for central office, all right? And that's the CO line. And, well, CO can stand for central office, or you can associate that CO with a line. So you can say CO line, central office line. Basically, that's the telephone line, POTS telephone line that comes from outside into the building. So it comes into the demarcation point, into the demarc from outside. SL stands for single line. It is the same thing. Those acronyms and that terminology is being used interchangeably. They are both these. Though. There we go. These two terms are being used interchangeably. Single line, CO line, POTS line, telephone line. All right. And we already know about the tip and ring, and we will go over that again a couple times because it's a concept that has to be revisited a couple times in order for you to retain the knowledge. All right, roll over. Let me just skip that for now. Go into the PBX. All right. PBX stands for Private Branch Exchange. A central office is a local branch exchange. Telephone, central office, a branch exchange, local to a neighborhood. Or a main branch exchange or whatnot. For the large cities, PBX, Private Branch Exchange, is a miniature version of the central office. You get the telephone lines coming in from outside, and then the PBX, sometimes it's referred as KSU, Key Service Unit, Key System Unit. It's a box that is mounted somewhere in the telecommunications room, and it serves as a telephone system, and by that I mean it's a, well, glorified traffic controller for all the telephone connections and conversations, including paging and voicemail and other peripherals that are associated with the phone system. All right. Generally speaking, if we are talking about a small business and you get a telephone system that is capable of 6 incoming telephone lines, and it is capable of connecting to 16 desktop telephones, so 16 extensions, so that would be called by 616. Then it's a small business type of a thing, 3 by 8, 3 incoming telephone lines, 8 extensions. All right. Then we usually refer to that system as KSU. key service unit or key system unit. If we're talking about the same thing but in a slightly bigger scale, like for example, a hospital, right? All the connections, can take up a whole room, just the cross-connection field. So as opposed to 16 telephone sets within the business or 16 extensions, you would have 957 active telephones, or 2048 telephones, or whatever. I'm just pulling the numbers out of the air. Excuse me. So usually we would refer to that as PBX. However, if you use those interchangeably, not that huge, overly huge grade of a deal. All right, now let's go back to that rollover and the ELEC number. What's a rollover? For that, I have to bring my board. Okay, let's say you have a KSU, which is the telephone system. All right, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's say 5 lines. Line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, and line 5. These are the CO lines, central office lines, coming from outside. And over here you have a bunch of extension telephone sets, all right? So usually you will have less incoming telephone lines than the telephone extensions within the company, because the truth is that not every one of those telephones is being used to call with an outside conversation. So statistically, you try to balance things out. Now, is there a formula for how many extensions ratio to how many incoming lines in order to have the company running smoothly? No, there's no formula. It depends on the dynamics of the business. It depends on the organics of the business. If it's a company that does, let's say, some sort of public service that usually you get the phone calls coming in the morning and sometime in the afternoon you can just get once upon a time you get a phone call or somebody needs to call outside, then you don't need so many lines. But if it's a telemarketing company, then you pretty much want a telephone line for every telephone. So it depends on the nature of the business. Usually you start with something like 616 or 3/8. That's a good ratio, and see what happens. And if you need more lines, you order more lines. Now, what's the idea of the rollover? Because I'm going to rollover idea. Okay. Now, let's say the company needs 5 lines to operate smoothly. Now, every single line will have a number, a distinct number. All right, distinct number. For whatever, our area code is 519, so 519, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or something like that, right? and the other line could be a different phone number. So if you call any of those phone lines, you're going to get into this KSU, and that KSU, depending on how it is programmed, it could be programmed that all the incoming calls are routed to the main receptionist when a human answers the phone, or it's being picked up by automated attendant, and it's going to present you with the choice of further pressing, numbers to if you want to talk to someone specific, or do you want to select a department or whatnot. It depends how things are programmed. Excuse me. So let's say you have 5 lines. Okay, well, there used to be those things that were called phone books, and they were really thick books, and well, whoever monopolized the telephone service within the area, they would print the phone books, and they would distribute them to the people. Right? They just drop them in front of your door. Later on, other companies came on the market, and internet has become really popular. So right now, if you want to get somebody's phone number that is within the main telephone provider, like for example, in our area, this would be still Bell Canada, then you could Google that phone number, or if it's not unlisted. Or usually you can Google the business name. Because now most of the people have cell phones, and those are not published anywhere. Right? So things have been complicated a little bit. However, let's say this is a business and you want your phone number to be published because you want business to exist on the market. So what are you going to do? Are you going to publish 5 phone numbers? That's not going to happen. Okay. So what you do is you would include all these lines in the rollover sequence, maybe 1 or whatever you're going to name it. Okay. When all those lines are included, like line 1 through 5, and maybe the company wants to order 2 more lines. One is going to have distinguished phone number, and that's going to be connected straight to the fax machine. All right. And could be another line that is not part of, that's still purchased by the same company, but these lines with these numbers are included in the rollover sequence and rollover 1. You can have more than one rollover sequence. Because one rollover sequence could be for the accounting department, and it could be programmed to dial 9 to get out, pick up, dial 9 to select an outside line. Another rollover sequence, another bunch of lines could be ordered, and it could be given to some other departments within the company, and that could be programmed as a hunt group from this side. It could be programmed to dial 8 to select a line, and those other lines, not these, but the other lines are going to be selected. And let's say they want a separate line for the fax machine, and they want a separate line for the 911 calls. That would be, well, some companies are required, if it's a bigger company, you have to check the local bylaw within the area where you are to see about the 911 lines. The idea of a 911 telephone line is that it's connected to a single line, single telephone, single POTS telephone, bypassing anything. Because this here KSU, that depends on power. that is provided to the locally to the building. Power goes down, phones don't work. The POTS lines get their power from the central office, so if the power is cut off to the building, that line is still active. You can pick up the phone and dial 911. Yes, everybody has their cell phones, but the owner of the company can't rely on maybe somebody will have a working cell phone because the whole legalities and all that. So a lot of times you're required to install a 911 phone. So these are the free kind of floating lines here, and these are the rollover lines. If it's in a rollover line, if all those lines are grouped in the rollover sequence, certain group, like rollover 1 for this company, then all you have to do is publish one of the telephone numbers. And usually you would choose one that is, the most friendly or something like that. Easier to remember, has some kind of a ring to it or a rhyme to it. So you choose the phone number to publish. Right? And so what happens is, let's say the company is working during the business hours, and some of the lines are being used, some of the lines are not being used, and it just forever changes. It has its own dynamics. So when you call the published number of the rollover sequence, the circuitry that's assigned to the rollover sequence is going to try to look at the first line and ask itself, is it available or is it busy? If it's busy, it's going to try to ring on the second line. If that is busy, it's going to try to ring on the third line. And if that is busy, this line. And if that is busy, that one. And if that is busy, it's still going to try to go back to the first. If there are some lines that are not being used, the rollover sequence is going to find one and it's going to ring on that. Now, the receptionist will see that line 3 is calling, for example. So that's the idea of a rollover sequence. You can add lines to the rollover, and that is not something that you program when you install the telephone system. This is something that you request. It's a feature that you request from the telephone line provider. So it would be, in our case, would be Bell Canada. It could be Rogers, excuse me. It could be TELUS, mostly at Western Canada, Western provinces, and so on, and some different companies in the States. So whoever is providing it, you have to specify that if you're ordering lines, these, they say, okay, we need 12 rollover lines, 12 in the city. Now, if you want to separate them, then you have to call the provider to see, okay, that line 5 we're going to use for something else. Can you take it off the rollover sequence? And it's nothing to do with you programming, it's you requesting it. So here is the rollover idea. Now, here's the problem. Here's the challenge. If, for example, you have to go and troubleshoot the system, that something is not happening, clients complain that sometimes they get some weird noises, or just the phone rings and nobody picks up, so something is not connected properly, right? So sometimes or maybe you're going to have to add 3 more lines because the client has ordered 3 more lines, and you have to connect them into the KSU. So, if they're not connected, then the rollover is going to select those lines if the other ones are busy, and if the line is not connected anywhere, it's just going to keep ringing for the client, at the other end, right? So sometimes you need to go to the BICS frame and find where that specific line is. quite often the providers will have a little paper sticker on a little string tied to the wire with the phone number. Sometimes they fall off. Sometimes they forget to label them. You need to, and sometimes you need to just verify that that line is what the sticker says. The problem is that if you pick up, if you pick up any phone and select one of those lines, you don't know which line is selected. And if you call your cell phone, on a display, you're going to get the published number, whichever it is. If you tap in with your diagnostic set, tap in directly, or sometimes called the BAT set, if you tap into that line at the demarcation point, dial your cell phone number, on the display of your cell phone number, you're going to get the published number displayed. So that you don't know whether you're calling from this line, from that one, problem, right? So that's why we have something that's called the ELEC number. Automatic Number Announcement Circuit, ELEC. Now, this works only with Bell Canada in our area. What you do is you have to know the area code that you're in. So in our case, it would be either 519 or 226, and I think there's a third new one that is being presented to us. So first, you dial the area code, and you dial that number. When you are tapped in directly into one of those lines, then you're going to wait a couple seconds, and some automated circuitry is going to pick up, and you're going to hear by voice the spelling of the number that you're calling from, and it's going to be the one that you're tapped in. So that's the ELEC number. Things are getting a little bit more complicated because some of the telephone lines are being provided by different companies, and they might have the ELEC number, they might not. So sometimes it's just impossible to, and sometimes it's troubleshooting a dry loop, which doesn't have a dial tone, so you can't dial out, but it still has a phone number. It still has a number. So sometimes you need to get something that's called a DSL line tester, and some of them are more expensive than others. Or sometimes when those lines are not labeled properly, you just say to the client, look, we need to call the provider, and we just have to get them to come back and make sure that they label all those lines with those little stickers on the strings, or the little labels on the string. Sometimes it just comes to that, all right? All right. Pots, we already know what that is. Tip and ring, we already know what that is. We know ATA. We'll talk about that. Analog telephone adapter. You're going to get that in next time we see each other in person. RJ stands for registered jack. We talked about that already. Battery present. When you're troubleshooting a telephone line, excuse me, you're looking for two things. Is the battery present, and is there dial tone if it's a phone line? Battery present, basically you're looking for that 48 volts DC, or negative 48 volts DC actually, present across the tip and ring. So the tip is going to be sitting at 0 with reference to ground, and the ring is going to be the red wire, and it is going to be negative 48 volts with reference to ground and reference to the tip. Because sometimes you can just say, okay, there is no dial tone, but the battery is present, which means that there's a true connection. The line is connected probably all the way to the central office. It's just that there's no dial tone, so probably it's on the provider's side that the dial tone circuitry has failed at the provider's side. But if the battery is not present, if there is no dial tone and there is no battery present, then you're going to lean towards the possibility of the line being cut off somewhere or broken or disconnected or not connected in the first place. Trunk. Multiple telephone lines physically bound in one cable. Basically, that's what it says. Mostly it would apply to at the provider's side. Like say, here's the trunk that goes to the east part of the city, right? Or here's one of the trunks that feeds the east part of the city. Here's the other trunk or bunch of trunks that feed the west part of the city, and so on. It's a bunch of telephone lines bound together. Pulse and DTMF. Pulse type dialing was originally implemented when the dial tone was introduced. Remember where there's that manual patching by the telephone operators? When you pick up the phone, you would not hear the dial tone. You would hear a human saying, "Number, please." Okay? But then things were automated, and the dial tone was introduced. In order to break the dial tone, you would have to dial the first number. You would have to recognize that you dialed the first number, and then you would wait for another and for another and for another, and then it would connect you to the proper telephone set wherever it is in the city or in the country or on the planet. So the pulse type dialing was originally implemented. It would be just breaking the telephone line or connecting the tip to the ground. If it's connected once, that means it's just number one. If it's connected 5 times, that means you dialed 5. So that would be associated with a rotary dial. You would take the rotary dial, put your finger in that hole where it says number 5, take it right to the end to where the stopper is, and let go, and this dial would just, at a certain speed, would go back to the original position, breaking the line 5 times. And with all the other numbers. So that's was the originally. Now later on, the tone type dialing, and the DTMF stands for dual tone multi-frequency dialing. Each key you press, you get the funny kind of a tone that consists of 2 frequencies, 2 specific frequencies. Why do we have 2 frequencies for every number? Well, you could easily, if it was just 1 frequency, the dial tone could be broken by anything that's, it could be a radio playing in the background, could be TV going on in the background, could be somebody talking about cars going by, and by accident that frequency was just got to the microphone, then the dial tone will be broken, and that frequency will be mistaken for a number that was dialed. So in order to make sure that the system knows that actual number was pressed on the keypad, it's looking for 2 specific frequencies together for every specific number. Right? Now, this type of dialing, it also helps with the further menus or further options when you call your local pharmacy and you have to listen to all the story that they have to tell you. And they will tell you that listen carefully because the menu might have changed. Then after that, you get the choice to press whatever number, and that system is going to recognize those frequencies associated with those numbers in order to recognize what choice you have made. Sometimes something happens because the KSU key service unit or the telephone system that is locally, as a box, is locally installed in some business, gets deprogrammed. Could be a power outage, could be a spike, could be a lightning hit somewhere, creating some sort of a spike, not enough to kill the system, but enough to mess it up. And the programming goes to the default, which is pulse dialing. So what happens if you pick up the telephone in the office, the telephone is connected to the box, to the phone system, and it reacts to you pressing the buttons. Now, when the phone system is programmed to pulse dial, as far as dial out, it is going to simulate those pulses that were done by the rotary dial. If it's programmed to dial out by DTMF, it is going to send the frequencies to the central office, thus letting that central office know that the number is being dialed. So sometimes you might get a service call saying that we can dial out, we can connect, but when we get the choices, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, we keep pressing, but nothing happens. It's probably because the phone system has gone back to the... So you have to go into the phone system programming, go to the line programming, and you have to find the option of programming the line to be tone dialing. So every phone system has different programming tree. You just have to be familiar with that. How do you get familiar with the phone systems programming and stuff? Well, the companies who sell those telephones, they want people to install those phones, and people need to know how they work in order to install them. So they will come over to your company and they will train you on how to install that system with details. Or sometimes the distributors who sell those telephone systems will have training sessions, and they will email all the people who are buying the stuff from them, all the people on the list. So ground start, call initiation, or a loop start. We were talking before, originally, you're talking long time ago. Here are the telephone lines on the telephone poles going wherever, right? So here is line 1, line 2, line 3, just a 3, and the other part of the circuitry would be connected to the ground, and it would be same thing on the other side. So they would be using ground reference as the other conductor. Later on, that was quite messy, unreliable, noisy. They have decided that every single telephone channel will have its own pair. So instead of ground start for dialing out, you have a loop start, because if you have a loop, you have a telephone and you have a whole pair going into another telephone, coming back. So it's almost like you could visualize it as a loop. Okay, one pair, tip and ring. Now, it beats me why the telephone systems, even the new telephone systems that are being sold on the market, when you take it out of the box, you have to do the programming, line programming, telephone set programming, voicemail programming, whatever. Don't forget time and date. They have the option when you go into the line programming, they have the option of selecting ground start or loop start. Why? Get rid of that. Nobody is using ground start for like the last 97 years, I guess. But still there. So now you know what to do, what it is. DOD, DID, direct outward dialing. These are more like features of the phone system. Direct outward dialing. when you pick up the handset at your desktop phone in your office, excuse me, the phone can be programmed in various ways. It could be that you pick up and nothing happens. You have to do the selections of whatever you want to do yourself, whether select a line or dial somebody's extension or do a page or whatever. Sometimes it is programmed to, depending on the choice of the client that uses those telephones, you pick up the phone and the client, whoever you install the system for, says, when I pick up the phone, I want my phone to just select an outside line right away. I don't want to do that extra step. I just want to dial the number. Right? Okay, so we're going to program that phone as DOD, direct outward dialing. You pick up the handset, automatically a first available outside line is selected from the hunt group, because from the outside, when it's rollover, we're talking rollover sequence, and within the company you program hunt groups, like hunting for a line. So the system is hunting for first available line that is not being used. Same thing, potatoes, okay, as far as the rollover and hunting groups. Now, direct inward dialing, similar thing, but instead of selecting an outside line, you're going to hear the dial tone, the internal dial tone, so it's going to ask you to dial somebody's extension. And here is something that's called a hotline. It is DID or DOD, either of those, but with a specific number dialed automatically. So if you pick up certain telephone, pick up the handset, and the phone number is dialed automatically just by you picking up the handset. Very popular things, like sometimes you go to some of the large department stores and so on, you can see by the entrance or by the exit of the store, you will see telephones on the wall with just handsets, no dial pads, nothing, just a handset. And they will have the names of the taxi companies. So it's a hotline programming. Certain taxi company would purchase the phone line into one of the huge department stores because they know that they're getting lots of phone calls from people getting taxis. They want their company to be called, so they will actually go and purchase that line, purchase the installation in there, just so they get the business from that. So that's one. The other thing, hotline, is used in elevators, but it's a little bit different because the elevator has to act as a 911 type of a setup. Has to act as a 911 type of a setup. What am I doing here? All right, so you have different phone lines. You got a rollover sequence. You have a fax line that's separate from the rollover sequence, and you have a 911 call that's just a line on your own, and it only can be connected to one telephone set, not two telephone sets at different locations, even though it could work, but you don't want that, because if one telephone set is not hung up properly, then the other one is useless. Okay? Then you might want to get another separate line, same as that 911 kind of a idea. And by the way, from that line, you can dial any number you want. It's just designated for the main reason for that thing being there is to dial 911 if there's need. For the elevator, I'm just going to label as E. You also want phone line to be connected to a hotline dialer that is independent and it is installed in the elevator. You don't want that thing is not dependent on any other power, Maybe it's going to have a battery that needs to be replaced. Maybe it's going to get the power from the phone line. However it's made, it has to be independent of the power provided to the building, because if somebody gets stuck in the elevator, if the power goes out, you still want them to be able to dial or press the button, and that thing would be having a phone number programmed of the elevator service company or something like that, whatever it's, whatever is needed to be programmed there. 911, we just talked about that. A 911 telephone set line or line set is a single line telephone POTS directly connected to the demarcation point, not going through the KSU or any kind of equipment. So you can have, you can dial 911 if there's need. Right? And again, it might be on a test. How many phones per one 911 line or designated line? One. Every phone line, every 911 phone that is on the production plan somewhere, it is supposed to have its own dedicated line. If there's another phone set on the other side of their big production hall, it should be connected directly to its own line, not sharing the one with the other phone, for the reason I just mentioned. If one of the phones is not hung up properly, then the other phone becomes useless. Single line versus proprietary telephone set. Proprietary telephone set works with the phone system that is being installed, whether it's the Northstar Meridian, whether it's the Panasonic, whether it's Toshiba, whether it's some other brand. I just mentioned those three, keep mentioning them. It's made by the company, it's made to work with that box. You connect that to the POTS outlet, it's not going to work. Single line is the POTS line, POTS telephone or POTS line. So single line phone, single line set, single line telephone set. That's the one you buy at the department store or some kind of a surplus store or whatever, and it's supposed to work as a POTS line. Right? In order to connect the single line to a system that you have installed, you need ATA adapter, analog telephone adapter. If you have a KSU, and these, let's say those are the proprietary telephones that work just with that, and if you want to get just a regular telephone single line set, you can't connect directly into it. You have to connect it through the ATA. It goes here and then it goes here. So this ATA is proprietary also to the system. It's made by the same company that does that, and it's supposed to work with that box. So the box thinks it's one of those, it's connected to it. But the ATA says, I trick you, right? So it connects there and then provides a POTS outlet, so regular POTS line can be connected. Music on hold, and we're going a couple minutes over here. Music on hold. Well, again, you could have an input for music on hold, and usually it would be one of those lines, pairs that is brought up to the BICs, okay? But let's say you have a music on hold input. All right, that's an input, and you just connect some sort of audio source. Now, when somebody client gets put on hold, they get to listen to the radio that's connected to that. Now, somebody got a pretty bright idea of commercializing that. There are companies in Canada and in the States that are offering music on hold service. They get they get contract with the whatever the company they approach, and they just get their business. So sometimes they hustle for business, and they say, "Hey, you are, let's say, an oil changing, company, right? So sometimes we get lots of phone calls and people being put on hold. Instead of listening to some local radio station, why don't they listen to some advertising that has to do with you? And they will provide a file. They will do recording in their own studio or whatever, providing some music, providing some talk over the music. And did you know that this month we have special on so and so and so, blah, 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 blah. So sometimes when phone calls being directed, the phone rings, it's being put automatically on hold. So they listen to the advertising, and then the receptionist picks up. Hi, can I help you? Right? And that's a paid service because every month the audio file has to be different or whatever. And they contact with the management of the company. They have a meeting and they say, okay, can you put this on special? We have this, and they'll take care of that audio file that is kind of looped. Right? So that audio box is also being connected to the network, Ethernet. And it has its own programming, so the company from outside can log into it when they need to, upload the file, and log out. So that's a music on hold service, quite popular thing. Dry contact relay, we're going to talk about that, but that goes with the paging interface, and we will talk about this next time we see each other when we get the first part of this class. And we still have to go over some other aspects of the actually, you know what, we have gone over whatever these here jacks, RJ11, RJ12, here's RJ11, here's RJ12. Same physical size, same physical aspects, except RJ11 has 1, 2, 3, 4 prongs. RJ12 has 2 more active prongs, and that's part of the telephone cord. RJ22 is that little smaller in size physically handset telephone cord. And of course here is RJ, remember RJ stands for registered jack. And that's the RJ45, that's what we use for Ethernet connection for the computer cables. All these RJ, except, okay, what did I say here? All these RJ plugs, except RJ22, which is a typical handset cord, will physically fit into the RJ45 modular jack. So the telephone cord, you can plug in, yes you can, into the network. It physically will fit. You just have to install or wire up and connect that jack as a phone. Or you can plug in the phone cord on the other end. And so the Ethernet connection can be used as a phone because the specifications of the Ethernet cable exceed the specifications that are needed to carry on a telephone line. But a telephone line, Cat3, cannot accommodate, you cannot use that connection for the Ethernet. That requires Cat5e, Cat6, Cat7, or whatnot specifications. It is possible to use data patch panel and terminate telephone signal on some ports instead of the BICs, right? So yes, you can do patch panel instead of BICs terminations. It's a common practice when terminating equipment racks in small business scenarios. Unloaded patch panels work best in the case for wiring comfort as well. So watch that video that says patch panel termination. I'm explaining there what loaded and unloaded patch panel is. Now here, just 2 more slides and we're done. So if you have to go, you'll be able to catch the end of it when you come back, and I'll place it on YouTube. Here is a typical for wiring diagram for the BICs. Remember when we did the BICs here? We did that 25 pair termination, and there is oops, no. Here is that RG21, and that 25 pair cable is terminated onto the BICS frame. And here is the breakout, pair 1, extension 1, pair 2, extension 2, and here's the, for example, some of the phone system will use 2-digit, some of the small ones will use 2-digit dialing for the internal dialing. And some of them will have 3-digit dialing, some of them will have 4-digit dialing, depending on depending on the system that you're dealing with. But this one here, for example, is a small 616, and this particular version of software is calling for 2-digit dialing. So extension 1 will be 21, 22, and so on. See that? So 16 extensions. You can connect 16. You can connect 16 of those, and they will be wired right here. Then there's a bunch of nothing here, 1, 2, 3 empty spaces, and here's external paging audio, so that, well, that's an output. Here's the external paging contact closure. These two work together because the commercial paging amplifiers, they will have dry contact input. So if there is an output connected from the phone system to the input of the amplifier, when somebody is doing the page, talking for the voice to be heard over the speakers, that's fine. But when they hang up the phone, that input is still active and it's going to pick up a noise, and it's going to manifest itself as a kind of a very annoying hiss in the speakers. So they solved that problem, the engineers solved the problem by having an additional contact closure that has to be completed in order for the input, paging input, to be enabled. So the phone systems will have the external paging contact closure associated with the paging feature. So when you pick up the handset and select the paging feature on the phone, it could be a feature number or it could be a button that's just programmed as page, then 2 things happen. The audio output of that phone system, which is on the BICS, well, the pair 22, for example, in this case, it's going to be activated, connected to your microphone on your handset, and the external paging contact closure is going to be activated, so the input is activated for the time that you're speaking. And then when you hang up, when you're done with the page, that audio is going to be deactivated, and so will be deactivated the external paging. So the input to the amplifier is going to be disabled, so you don't hear some unnecessary noise. Auxiliary ringer contacts. Do we have one here? Yes, we have auxiliary ringer. You could have, with bigger systems, you can have multiple contacts, and they can be associated by programming to certain telephone extensions. Like, for example, this here, the station 2, is a supervisor's office in the production line. And the supervisor is working with the people on the line, helping them and whatnot, not necessarily being all the time in their office. But the production line is noisy and And if somebody wants to reach that person, they will not hear the phone ring in their office. So you could install an auxiliary ringer, or sometimes it's called loud ringer, above their door or in some kind of a visible area, and that contact could be associated with the ringing of that phone. So if that phone rings, this thing gets activated. Whatever it is, it has to have its own power quite often, and it's just the contact being close. So some of them are ringing loud, some of them are flashing like strobe light, some of them have both ringing and flashing strobe light. And music on hold we already talked about. General overview, that's the last slide. See that? That's the last slide. Yeah. What we talked about the conventional telephone systems. Here's an example of 616, and this particular system has input jacks. 6 lines, and 16 telephone extensions, but the telephone extensions are connected to the BICs, and these here are just telephone jacks, so you can plug in the telephone cord. Some of the phone systems have everything on BICs. It just doesn't involve but depending on the system that you get. All right, that RJ21X or RJ21 M-Funnel connector connects 25 pair into one of those strips. And over there you have the pretty much a pinout of that, and you go by that. So we have telephone extensions, we have the ATA adapter that is proprietary to this phone system. This is Northstar Meridian. A Panasonic ATA will not work with the Meridian. Toshiba will not work with Meridian. They have Cisco will not work with the Meridian. Okay, so ATA adapters are proprietary things. So this here has to understand signal of this here. They have to talk the same language, and on the output they have POTS. So universal devices can be connected that understand POTS type of a protocol. Paging interface understands POTS protocol. What am I doing here? There. Go on. And when you dial the extension, because that acts as a phone, it makes the phone system think that it's a phone. It has its own extension. It acts as a phone, except it doesn't have a phone's headset. You could plug in a single line set into the ATA adapter, and that way you can use the single line telephone set. Or you can use another thing that uses the POTS protocol, such as paging interface, will understand the POTS ringing signal, pick up, and react accordingly depending on how it's programmed. It might give you a confirmation tone to start talking right away, or it might give you a confirmation tone after which you have to press a number of the zone you want to page. You want to page the hallways, you want to page the production line, you want to page the offices, you want to page the whole thing, all right, like an all call. Depending on the requirement of the business, depending on how this thing is set up. It's flexible as far as programming. So that's as far as the peripherals connected. Now, here's the CO line 7. It's independent, bypassing everything, goes straight into the single line set, which is supposed to act as 911 phone. That could be placed somewhere on the production line with a little, advertising arrow that's where it is, letting people know. And every single line, if you need more than one because of the size of the production hall, maybe you need more than one of those placed in the production hall. Each one of those has to have its own designated telephone line. Again, for the reason that if they're sharing a line and there are two different locations, if one of the phone is hung up improperly, then the other phone is becoming useless. Right? Other peripherals, you can connect ATA. ATA is quite useful thing. Right? You can connect ATA adapter to a phone, that can be placed in like a reception, not a reception, as a well, in the lobby. If it's a controlled access, there could be a lobby that you go into, and then there's a phone and with some instructions of how to reach the receptionist, so somebody can get to you and open the door for you if it's a controlled access type of a business. Also, door stations. The door stations, it's a press button thing, quite often used in the truck gates or the truck entrances. The truck comes up to the receiving area, and at the height of so the truck driver just has to roll down the window, and at appropriate height, this would be placed on some sort of like on a stick, right? And the truck driver just has to press the button, and that will have a hotline programming, would dial a specific extension to where is it going to be programmed to dial the main reception and let them know that the truck is, the truck driver wants to get in, or maybe supervisor of the receiving department or whatnot. Depending on the time of the day, the hotline could be different. So the hotline number could be different. So that's and that will connect to the ATA adapter. Also, voicemail, quite popular thing. Sometimes the voicemail is going to be used, provided locally, and sometimes the voicemail service can be purchased from the telephone line provider company. Either way, right? And that's the last slide for the telephone systems conventional telephone systems. Next time we'll see each other this week. I'll see your group. I think you guys are section 1, 3, and 5. And I'm talking about, if somebody watches this video later, I'm talking to my 2025 class, 2025 cable systems or network cabling class. You're going to get the other part of the lesson in person, which is already recorded. So as I said, I'm doing this so when I publish the YouTube lessons, we get all of them for your reference. Cool. What's today? Thursday. Don't forget to vote. 2025 Ontario. Okay. I cannot tell you who to vote for, but I can remind you that yes, we have the voting day. All right. Cool. I'll see you when I see you. Thank you for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the week.
Have a good one.
Thank you.